Hello everyone, and welcome to another First Mentor Initiative video tutorial. I'm Quinn, the captain of FTC Team 6567, the Roboraiders, based out of New York State in the United States. And I'm here today to talk to you about documentation with the engineering notebook, as well as all things judging prep. So I've prepared a little presentation for you guys to look at today, and if I happen to go too fast, feel free to pause and take a minute to let things sink in. It's going to go kind of quickly because there's a lot to talk about. And the engineering portfolio is a huge part of winning awards in FTC and is a key to success, as well as judging prep. So in this video, those are the two things I'm going to cover, and without further ado, let's get straight to it. So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about my team and our qualifications for this tutorial in particular. So my team 6567 is based out of New York, as I mentioned, and we've qualified for Worlds twice in 2017 and 2019. We notably won the Judges Award in St. Louis in 2017 at Worlds. This was all thanks to our extensive prep for the interview and the questions that followed. So this tutorial is aimed to get you started with crafting an eye-catching engineering portfolio, as well as enable success for your team in the judging room. So first, I'm going to start off with the engineering notebook. If you'd like to learn about judging prep instead, I'm going to leave a timestamp under my webcam, so you can skip to that if you just want to hear me talk a little bit about judging prep. It's going to be more just me talking because I can't really give visuals about judging because it's a verbal speech, and so for that reason, it's going to be a bit quicker than the engineering journal, which is more summative. Okay, so what is the engineering portfolio? So in previous years, the engineering notebook is what it used to be called. It was this giant journal which detailed every single step in the design of your robot and your team's seasonal progression. Luckily for us, we've had a change in the criteria of the engineering notebook, which is now called the engineering portfolio, or ENP for short. I have some examples listed below me here. And so this portfolio is drastically more simple than the engineering notebook. It's a lot more closed-ended, I guess, in a good way. It's a 15-page document rather than a multi-100-page book, which basically summarizes your team season and your robot, your outreach, your sustainability, your fundraising, etc. And it basically just includes all the most important details, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in just a second. So with that being said, ever since this big change happened a few years ago, teams have struggled with knowing what to document to create an effective engineering journal that wins awards. So here are some approaches that we recommend. So number one is to document your process. Number two is to detail. And number three, my personal favorite, is to design. And so I'm going to go into all three of these into some depth. Remember, if you have any further questions, feel free to ask any of us at the First Mentor Initiative, or just pause the video and send us an email. You can reach us on Discord or via Gmail. We're going to start off with documenting, and you see I have a little visual of our portfolio from last year. At Regionals, we did not make it to Worlds last year. However, I still think this is a good example. Alright, so starting off with documentation, the most important step of the engineering portfolio, and your season in general, is to document, right? Without proof of it happening and details of it happening, it's hard to believe that it did happen. Okay, so whether it's a drawing, a screenshot of CAD, notes you took at an outreach event, or really anything, it's all important to document. As the co-captain of my team, I'm encouraging every member this year to submit a journal entry each day, which entails what they accomplished with photo evidence. And this allows for a greater amount of documentation, obviously, which at the end of the day will be boiled down and summarized in this 15-page document. So keep in mind that there is no documentation without photo evidence. And I want us to take a quick look at what I have here. It's a screenshot of our portfolio, so the quality is not the best, but this is from our outreach section. This is about half a page. And so here we've split it up into a lot of different events. I'll talk about how to leave in details and what you should put in and whatnot in just a second. But we basically split it into three sections. This was for community outreach. We split it into making first loud in our community, giving back, and then FTC at Red Hook High School. And so, yeah, essentially we document, we make sure to add important details. Usually with documenting, you'll write more than you need. And so we kind of boil it down to these, and the important details are highlighted. And of course we dropped our socials on the bottom. I'd recommend doing that, so if the judges are curious, they could take a look there. But that's enough sidetracking. Okay, so keep in mind that there's no documentation without photo evidence. One saying my coach always tells our team is pictures or it didn't happen. So photos of parts you've made, screenshots of code, etc. The more that you put in this portfolio, the merrier. It's a lot easier for judges to visualize what you've done rather than read it off, and it's much more believable if there's actual photo evidence. Okay, so now you might be wondering why you need to write all of this if the portfolio is only 15 pages long. And the answer to that is to create an engineering notebook. This may be the biggest kind of hack or secret or advantage to, in my eyes, the Think Award. And although it's no longer required, having a big engineering notebook at your pit area when judges walk around is definitely a game changer. I think it can up your game and spark interest in considering your team for an award. So it's always handy to have one. So say you're at a tournament and judges are coming around, it's that time of the tournament, and they come to your pit. They ask you about a mechanism. So maybe you're up for the Innovate Award. And so you walk through the mechanism, and then you can say, hey, right here, look at our engineering notebook. We've documented this process. And judges will go, oh, in their minds, they'll be, whoa, what is going on? This team is crazy. This team has documented everything. And so that'll get them thinking maybe more than just the Innovate Award. Maybe this team's more. Maybe you're working your way up to that coveted Inspire Award. And so the final point I have for documenting is longevity. And this is not too much with the engineering notebook, but say like in a few years' time, the future members of your team encounter an issue, which is a similar problem to one you've already had. It's really easy to look back to what you've already documented to solve a problem that you've already solved. So last year, for example, we used a hanging mechanism from a previous year as a prototype for a drone launcher. It was bow release that used tension on a cam. And so we basically cracked back that cam and launched that big airplane. And this gave us a lot more knowledge on the challenge and just made things easier to document. Alright, so moving on to our second approach here, it is detail. And so I have an example here below. This is the Infinite Turtles Team 16461, their portfolio from Freight Frenzy, which was I think 3 years ago. Now, as much as you may want to mention every little detail about your team to present to the judges in this portfolio, it's just impossible to do it in 15 pages. That being said, it's crucial that your team agrees on what to write and what not to write in this portfolio. For example, if my team used a Go Build a Strafer Kit drivetrain that had custom odometry pods, I'd want to talk more about the making of those custom odometry pods than the Strafer Kit itself. Yes, you should still mention the metrics about the drivetrain, like what gear ratio you're using, how you modified it if you did so, etc. But keeping the details for the most innovative parts is the most important. Take a look at the portfolio here below. You can see that one page, the page on the left, is chock full of concrete info on their drivetrain and general robot design choices that come with that, while the next page on the right is completely dedicated to this locking mechanism, which as a result actually won them the Innovate Award at Worlds. So you can just take a look at that, pause the video if you need. I'm going to move on to design, but yeah, this is a great portfolio, and I found these at this website linked below. It's basically a culmination of a lot of portfolios that are open source. Shout out to the teams who've open sourced their portfolios. We have as well. This concept of detailing also goes for outreach, by the way. Say you had a booth at a STEM convention, but you also did a fundraiser for an FLL program in your area. You'd want to touch on the fundraiser more to sort of win the judges over. So basically be conscious of what other teams in the competition may be doing in terms of outreach. It can be really hard to stand out when everyone's so similar. Say you're in a competition with 30 other teams, right? How many of those teams do you think went to a convention rather than basically started a new team? Probably more of them went to the convention. So basically, detailing is just writing out what's important and what's not. It should be a consensus among your whole team. You may have a bias if, say you worked on something, and at the end of the day, it might have been less important to touch on than something else. It's important to weigh in everybody's ideas and not fully leave the portfolio just to one person. This final approach to the portfolio, and my personal favorite, is design. This is where you're able to kind of go crazy and show your team off for who you are and differentiate your team from other teams in the competition. Although there are restrictions and rubrics for winning awards in the portfolio, one thing that's up to interpretation almost completely is the design. And so with the design, I only have a couple pointers here. Just be intentional with it, make sure your colors are readable, and the order of your portfolio is still cohesive. Last year we submitted this portfolio on the left in one of our qualifiers, thankfully not regionals, because this was a really harsh color scheme, and although it looked okay online, as you can see, that bolded gray was not that great. Anyways, we printed it out, and it turned out that it was really hard to read on that gray background, and it was probably really unpleasant for the judges as well. So definitely be conscientious of this as well. On the right here is a much better example of a great design. This team actually won design at Worlds, I believe. This is Curiosity Robotics out of California, 12635. As you can see, they have a full picture of their robot. Remember, it's important that the judges can see what your robot looks like. It's good to have a pretty big picture of your robot somewhere in their portfolio. But not only do they have that, they also leave room to talk about odometry and all this math, this crazy stuff that, as a builder, I'm not really sure about. This is just a great design. I like the different font sizes, the different font colors, and it's just a really clean, professional looking portfolio. A good way to think about that portfolio is like you're at an interview and you're selling your team and this is your resume. It's really important that you get this thing right, and I think the design is a really good way to show off your team and be unique while also presenting your information in a cohesive manner that makes you guys look like a business. Alright, so now with the engineering portfolio mostly squared away, I'm going to move on and talk about judging prep. Okay, so the way that judging works as of right now in Into the Deep, you are allotted 5 minutes to present your team, and it's only your team talking. And then there's about 8 minutes of Q&A where the judges will ask you questions about your team, your robot, your outreach, etc. And so every team kind of approaches the judging room differently. The only commonality is that 5 minutes. So how do you tackle that? That's the question. How my team does it, or how I've heard other teams do it, is that you kind of summate what you have in the portfolio and turn it into a more conversational tone, and you kind of chop it up between each member and make sure everybody speaks. That's an important point. You want to make sure everyone gets at least one chance to speak in this 5 minutes when you're presenting to the judges. It kind of shows that your team is very evenly divided and that you guys know your stuff. However, it's important to note the judging interview doesn't have to be fully serious mode. You definitely want to smile and be friendly. At the end of the day, you're super enthusiastic for robotics. If you're watching this tutorial, you want to do well, and that means that you love this program, so you should show it, and you should present yourself as that way. And this will just more or less have an adverse effect of just making things go smoother and be more enjoyable. So once you've figured out the amount of time everybody's going to get, you're going to want to divide it and I guess make a list of what everyone's going to say. And keep in mind, this is just what I'm recommending to you. Every team does it differently. I would assign a set of bullet points to everybody that they should cover, and you want to definitely practice. And so if you have coaches around, practice with them. If not, you can record yourselves. That's a good practice. Make sure you're using good body language, projecting enough. That's an important thing. You want to make sure the judges hear you. As you might have noticed, I talk a little fast sometimes. That's something I'm still working on. But in the judging room, I typically keep it at a pretty slow pace, because if you're using big words with volunteers who may not know what they mean, it's important to sort of articulate and get your point across as you want. And so you're going to make these bullet points, and if you guys need, while you're doing this practice, you can boil it down to full scripts. However, there's definitely a fine line between making a script and sounding like a robot. There's been times where I've practiced with my team and we've made full scripts for ourselves, and we just end up talking really fast and basically like we're a teleprompter. Every word's the same speed, and it's just da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Not enough time for the judge to think about what you're actually saying. So it's definitely important to bullet what you need, but don't get too into it, and sort of leave time for yourself to think and for the judges to think as well. That's the most important thing, because if you get through the 5 minutes, you got everything you wanted to talk about, awesome, let's go. But if the judges don't understand any of it, there wasn't any point to going that fast and covering everything. This kind of goes with the detailing part of the engineering portfolio. If you skip that, I'd recommend going back and just watching that section real quick. Okay, and so that's what I'd recommend for the 5 minutes. Make sure you're evenly splitting up between robots, outreach, fundraising, your team. Add some character to it. Hi, this is us. There are definitely more kind of nitty-gritty things that I could recommend to you. I know some teams have sort of approached it as every student introduces themselves and says what they do. If you're asking me, I would recommend against that. The portfolio does that itself. It should include, what each member of the team does, because that is a criteria for some awards. Yeah. Then after you're done with this presentation, the judges will stop you. If you reach the 5 minutes, it depends on who the judge is, but they could just stop the timer immediately and go, wait, stop. If it's the last person, they're etching out that last sentence, they might let them go. But just definitely prepare and time yourselves, most importantly, to get to that 5 minutes. Time each person as well. And so maybe some could be boiled down, maybe drop some big words, make it more cohesive. It's all about cohesion, really. And that brings us nicely into the next point of the interview, which is the Q&A. And so this is a longer period of time where the judges are going to ask you questions. And this is also another reason why it's important not to fully go off script and keep practicing with the same script, because if you become so robotic in your script and they turn and ask you questions and it's like you're a totally different person, that might not be a great look. Okay, and so they'll ask you broad questions about your team, and keep in mind these judges have sheets in front of them of what they're supposed to hit. And so if you fail to hit it in the interview, or maybe don't touch on it enough, that's when they go in and they nail down those final questions for your team. At this time, they'll come later, and I'll talk about that in a second. And so in the Q&A, they're going to ask you these questions, and I would only spend maximum 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes as a team talking about them. And so say you talk a lot about your robot in the interview and you really nail it down, and they ask you, what was your outreach plan this year? How do you keep members? So you go, oh, we have a club expo, we reach out to our school, we put ourselves on this news station, etc. And then maybe the person next to you has something else to say. There's no shame in pausing and stepping forward as another team member to clear up some things that the other teammate said. Bonus points if you're like, hey, building off of what Johnny over here said, or building off of what this person over here said. Showing that team cohesion really screams the Motivate Award, and that's an important award to get. If you're really cohesive as a team and smiley, it's just going to be a great vibe in that room, and at the end of that 15 minutes, it's going to be like, wait, that was it? That was like a conversation. And that's kind of what you want. But obviously you're hitting the points that you want to hit. And that brings me to my next point, which is make sure you hit everything you want to hit. If you feel like maybe it's those last 3 minutes of the Q&A section and the judges keep nailing you on outreach, maybe you can tie it into your robot if an outreach event connects to it. Say you went and visited a hospital and saw one of their robots working in surgery, per se. Maybe you can say that this helped us to develop our arm here, which has this many degrees of freedom, which we noticed in the surgery room, the operating room. This robot was working like it's nothing, and so we decided, hey, let's just implement something similar into our robot. And drawing those connections is really important. It all intertwines, and it sort of just builds, and it's a really good way to sort of tie in things that you maybe stress that you're missing. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the interview, they'll say, okay guys, your time's up. Thank you guys so much. You say thank you for volunteering. Make sure to say thank you for volunteering, because I mean, we can never thank our volunteers enough for getting FTC events running. And maybe drop in the come see us at our pit if you have more questions, or check out our engineering portfolio if you want to learn more about X thing. And so yeah, I think that's good enough for the judging interview portion. I'm going to talk about pit judging now, which is kind of part 2 to judging. And so 15 minutes, once again, just like the portfolio, 15 pages, it's not enough to summate your team. And so they're going to come for a second round, usually midday. I'm from the Excelsior region. Usually it's around midday at the end of qualifications. They'll come around, maybe they'll catch some games, watch you guys perform, see if your robot's doing what you say it's doing, and eventually they'll swing their way around to your pit. That's if you're up for an award. If they don't swing by your pit, don't be discouraged. Maybe if one's walking by, you can say, hey, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Just sort of saying, you can do that. Usually they'll hit most of the teams, though. So with pit judging, be ready, okay? You always want to have somebody at your pit in a competition just there. If somebody's coming to scout you, if anybody's, hey, this part fell off of a robot, is there any chance you guys have a spare for us? This is really important for the judges as well. And a good workaround for this is making a group chat of all the people at the tournament and texting it and pinging everybody when the judges start coming around, so that naturally a couple people will come and flock to your pit. And once again, it's another very fine line between the amount of people at your pit answering their questions and overcrowding them. For example, our last event back in December was in a high school gymnasium where we didn't have a lot of room in our pit, a lot of extra room to sort of walk around and let other teams pass through and be courteous. And so the judges came around, and all 11 of us basically swarmed them in a circle, and it was very tight. I couldn't really even hear my teammates. And so you maybe want to have like 4 or 5 people there who really know what they're talking about. If they're talking about Innovate, you want to have your builders there. If they're talking about control, you're going to have your programmers there. If you're talking about connect, have your outreach people there. Moral of the story is you don't want to overcrowd them, but you also want to have your robot at the pit so you can point at things. That's, again, if you have an engineering notebook, point at that. Definitely be conversational now, though, because people could be walking by and they want to hear you talking to the judges. You want to set an example for these teams and really be the best out there and be conversational. And okay, so yeah, I mean, that's all I really have for pit judging. But usually when pits come out, and especially when they come to your pit, I myself always have a big smile on my face because I know there's a potential for us to get an award. And so it's really nice to know that the judges want to come around and hear more about our team. And so we always take advantage of that and sort of have multi-layered answers where we'll build off each other and keep building and building, showing that cohesion as a team, and ultimately putting ourselves up there. So yeah, at the end of the day, make sure every member at the competition knows what's in your portfolio, what's in your robot. Say you have a rookie member who maybe isn't too familiar about the robot, maybe they focus on outreach. You want to sort of outline the each subsystem to them before heading into that judging room in case any questions are asked. Maybe they'll start with answering and then you can build off them. This is a great way of just showing that everybody's in the loop, everybody knows what's going on. Matter of fact, at regionals last year, a judge asked me specifically to stop answering him and direct me to a rookie member and sort of understand what they've done for the team. And so just to make sure it's not just us. You know, it depends on the size of your team. I know some of your teams may only be 4 or 5 kids. Okay, so that was sort of my spiel on judging. I hope that made some sense. If you have any questions, once again, I keep saying this, feel free to DM me on Discord at ch_in or any of the First Mentor Initiative mentors. And I guess that concludes this tutorial. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Once again, this is Quinn from 6567 reporting from the First Mentor Initiative. Thank you.